94% reduction, that's amazing. Could that be a $1 billion drug? It doesn't seem like it. 2-year endpoint, pretty good, but it's a gamble. All right, so would you pay $3 billion for partial rights to 2 drugs and whole rights to 1 complement drug? That's fairly competitive as well. I don't know, kind of seems like a short. The plot has thickened. I withdraw the comments about there being a short. So that could be pretty interesting. I don't necessarily see the correlation between RAGE and asthma, but the possibility that it works would be a game changer, obviously. 94% reduction in ZAAT accumulation. All right. J&J generally doesn't develop a drug unless it can be multi-billion. All right, I'm going to get going in like half an hour, so I have time to look at maybe one stock. I think Arrowhead is a good one. There's a lot to unpack, though. Okay, this is weird. They should have a more recent 10K. Oh, there's 10K. Got it. All right, so it's called Arrowhead Pharmaceuticals, ARWR. It's a really prominent biotech company. $106 a share. Let's use Gödel to look at the stock price. The problem with these quote monitors is you sometimes don't know where it is on your list if you have too many stocks on your list. But sometimes you also get used to it. Like you know, okay, that's the spot. Right. So the way mRNA works, and RNA interference especially works in this case with the RISC system is really important and interesting. And I would encourage you to learn it if you don't know. Here's a link to the Arrowhead. I'm still calling it by its old name, the Arrowhead 10K. And if I were you, I'd read 10Ks all day long if you want to be a good investor. That's what Warren Buffett does. Learn as many companies as you can. That's my advice. They're trying to target these drugs a little more fine-tuned. But before we get into that, the stock price is $32. There's 100 million shares outstanding. So a share is a piece of a business. You have a 1/100 millionth share of this company if you buy $33, 1 share, right? If you buy 1,000 shares, it would cost you $32,800, but you would have a 1/100,000th share, right? Because there's 106 million shares, so you would have a 1/106,000th share. If you bought 1 million shares, it would cost you $32.8 million. And you would have a 1/106th share, a little less than 1% of the company for $33 million. So the total market cap or market value of the company is just the product of the two. You multiply the price by the number of shares and you get $3.5 billion. So it's a $3.5 billion company. That's kind of a mid-sized company. I would call that a mid-cap, I guess. It's even closer maybe to a small cap. $3 billion company is not a small company, but it's not a huge company either. So it's kind of like mid-sized. So a drug company I really like the drug industry because it's basically a sum of the parts. You can actually add up each drug, and that's really all there is to the value of the company. Sometimes there's some value for a company's technology, but most technologies in the drug industry aren't that valuable as quote-unquote platform values or something like that. So we're just going to write down kind of some of the basic details of each drug. And again, this modularity that exists in the pharma industry is fairly unique. There are other industries that have something similar, but I really like the fact that each drug is kind of its own asset and you can value them individually. All right, so they have this pipeline chart. It's a little hard to read, so I'm going to blow it up a little bit. There it is. All right, so we got their most advanced drug, which is ARO-APOC3, and this is a cardiovascular disease drug. And I'm not sure it's that great of a drug. Then they have ANG3, and they've got this drug, 𝗩𝗚𝗪𝗓. Okay, so that's their 3 cardiovascular disease drugs. Dyslipidemia, which is a really competitive market. It looks like they have a deal with Amgen in one of them. Now they have a cystic fibrosis drug. That's a really bad target. Most people have given up on ENaC2. So that is basically a 0. RAGE sounds interesting. MUC5AC probably is nothing. And MMP7 is probably nothing. And if you become an expert in different targets, which each drug has a target, it's got some kind of place that it's pointed to. It's a protein of some kind. you can kind of tell what markets for diseases as well as what targets are interesting or worthwhile. So I'm seeing a lot of less than worthwhile targets here. And that's one of the problems with platform companies is everyone's chasing the same target, whether it's RNA or antibodies. You sort of have this issue of, okay, well, we all have this technology. We're all going to point it at the same targets. And the trick is who gets the best targets. But everybody kind of knows about the same targets. But, you know, there are companies that outperform others. So this is sort of their setup. I'm curious about the HPV drug. That's hepatitis B. The gout drug is worthless. I'm curious about the complement drug. I'm guessing it's C3 complement. Sort of curious about the NASH drug, but not really. Probably, I mean, I really like FSHD as a disease, but it probably won't work. RNA is a tough target for that. Any muscular disease. Don't tell that to this other company, though. AATD is probably pretty exciting, but there are CRISPR endeavors for that disease. All right, so we have some sense of their pipeline just as a quick glance. To me, it's nothing here that's too exciting, but let's read more carefully and not try to have any preconceived notions. All right, so they say that the first drug is ARO-APOC3. So this is a drug that stops APOC3. You know, we can make a sheet just to make some notes. This is apolipoprotein C3. It's a component of VLDL, chylomicrons, which, you know, this is important in hypercholesterolemia, but there are a lot of drugs that can help you there. Although triglyceridemia is maybe sometimes a little harder to treat. The thing about triglyceridemia is it's not that serious of an illness unless you have this FCS, which is this really severe form, familial hypertriglyceridemia. And even if you have triglyceridemia, there's a lot of issues with whether or not lowering it will actually make a difference. Because there were companies in the past that have tried to market hypertriglyceridemia drugs, and you might hear from a doctor, oh, your triglycerides are high. I have tri spelled wrong here, TRI. So yeah, FCS patients have really high triglycerides, but I thought there was other FCS drugs. I thought Ionis had one. So they have, let's see, this is a phase 2B trial called the Shasta-2 trial. Interesting name. Sounds like a rap album or something. Severe hypertriglyceridemia. So the question is, like, will the FDA approve you for hypertriglyceridemia? Like, here's another phase 2B study, but let's go to phase 3. This is FCS study. That is an approvable disease. These people have such high triglycerides, like, they really need help. And they're calling that the Palisade study. Okay, so we'll kind of look at the hypertriglyceridemia market, but it's very, very small market, you know, not exciting. Not enough probably to value a company at $3.5 billion. So probably the more exciting drug people are interested in is ANG3. So this is called ARO-ANG3. And this is for dyslipidemia. Now that is a disease that has a stronger tie to having high lipids results in cardiovascular events. When I say events, that's a nice word for heart attack, stroke, and death. So lowering lipids is something the FDA and doctors more accept is directly tied than, say, triglycerides, which is more loosely tied. At least that's what the clinical evidence has been. I'm not saying you should go get high triglycerides. So ANGPTL3 is angiopoietin-like protein 3. It inhibits LPL. If you inhibit it, you'll lower LDL. If you look at the some of these drugs, like in this market for like extra lipid reduction, haven't done that well. This market's fairly saturated, no pun intended. Here's a phase 2b study called ARRWR2. And then here's another study in HoFH, which is this bizarre genetic hypercholesterolemia. Okay, so we'll break down kind of the market for other dyslipidemia agents, and that's kind of like the reason that sometimes we look at these big pharma stocks and people wonder, well, why are you spending so much time on Pfizer or Merck? Because those stocks aren't going to do very much. And that's true. Their stocks themselves probably won't do a lot, although I've made a lot of money on those stocks over the years. You just have to trade them a little differently than you would trade a company like Arrowhead. But even more importantly, you kind of get a feeling for what the industry's interested in, what the industry's heading towards. Because at the end of the day, like these small biotech companies, even a bigger one like Arrowhead, at the end of the day, they're all kind of little small companies that are not going to last forever. You can't take them too seriously. They're not like an Eli Lilly or a Merck that'll be around a while. Oftentimes their goal is to be acquired, that's right. ENaC is not even worth discussing, I think. There have been ENaC drugs and they've failed. So I think very few people take ENaC too seriously. RAGE is maybe a little more exciting. So they're doing an asthma study. That's kind of neat. There's a lot of room for new asthma drugs. It's just a space that's kind of been ignored. There are more people interested in it these days, but still it's like very underserved in my opinion, even with new drugs like Dupixent or the AstraZeneca drug. So that could be pretty interesting. I don't necessarily see the correlation between RAGE and asthma, but so my guess is that trial will fail, but the possibility that it works would be a game changer, obviously. All right, MMP7 for IPF. IPF is a big market. MMP7 is unlikely to be that successful, but what's cool about these guys is that they're doing inhalation of RNA. I think nobody else has really done that. There's something to be said for that. That's kind of neat. And here's maybe the most interesting drug, which is their complement 3 inhibitor. Again, kind of a competitive market, but something that's a well-known kind of rare disease market that has a lot of revenue affiliated with it. So GSK licensed HSD. Okay, I see it now. Horizon licensed the gout drug. XDH isn't too exciting. I guess it's Amgen's now. Takeda licensed the AATD drug. This has now got a name called 𝗩𝗟𝗔𝗬𝗟𝗦𝗦. 𝗩𝗟𝗔𝗬𝗟𝗦. This is probably their lead drug, I guess. But they have a deal with Takeda, which makes it it's always a little confusing. So it's called TAC999. That's Takeda's code, or ARO-RAGE. The generic name is, like I said, 𝗩𝗟𝗔𝗬𝗟𝗦. And it's for this liver disease, genetic liver disease, very interesting illness called alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. It's also called AATD. It damages liver and lungs. So if you silence the gene, you probably end the disease. This is also something that we mentioned Intellia is working on as liver CRISPR. So there will be competitors to Intellia. Kind of reminds me almost exactly of what's going on in the other market that Intellia is in. Let's take a look real quick. The ATTR market and the AATD market. So they have an AATD CRISPR coming real soon. In fact, this year, the first people will be dosed with that. And their ATTR curative therapy, basically, is also happening. So one has to wonder if the Intellia IND in second half 23 would overshadow this. Although, again, as we talked about it with Intellia, like it's not really clear that CRISPR is the end all be all of and the end of days for antisense and other nucleic acid therapies. They could compete effectively, I think. If I were the patient, I'd rather get the one-shot cure. But okay, so this is pretty interesting. This is the hepatitis B treatment, 3989. You can see that J&J has invested a lot in developing this drug. Wonder if they'll advance it to phase 3. J&J generally doesn't develop a drug unless it can be multi-billion. That's at least been my experience with Johnson & Johnson. Other drug companies that's not often the case. They're really focused on those multi-billion-dollar drugs. Even $1 billion for J&J is like not that exciting. Okay, so here's 𝗩𝗚𝗘𝗢𝗏. This is LPA. For some reason, this drug is like deprioritized. Although it says that they are doing a phase 3. So I don't know what, it's probably not deprioritized, but they don't talk about it. So of course, needless to say, Arrowhead has no products on the market. So it's just a company with a ton of costs. And here's the cash flow. I guess their fiscal year ends in September. Joy of joys. You can see just 100 million out the door, 100 million out the door. This year, they got 170 million in the door. I think that was probably from licensing their products. So they did a deal with Royalty Pharma, who I consider to be pretty smart money. So Royalty Pharma has a stake, in essence, in... Oh, that's probably why it's deprioritized. It looks like they basically bought the stake of 𝗩𝗚𝗘𝗢𝗏. So they probably don't have too much economics left. All right, so they don't have any debt from what I can see. So it's about a $3 billion enterprise value. It's a really hard to parse company. It's a lot like Ionis, but to me, the targets are less exciting relative to Ionis. It sounds like AAT drug and the Hep B drug are most of the value. So we have to do a pretty deep dive into those. As I mentioned, for AATD, a lot of nucleic acid, gene therapy, and CRISPR companies are targeting AATD as kind of a fairly low-hanging fruit. And they've given up some of those economics already to Takeda, which for a disease that's pretty easy to sell yourself, I'm not sure that that was the best decision. It sounds like they sold all the royalties of 𝗩𝗚𝗘𝗢𝗏 already. The FCS drug won't be very high selling. The ANG3 drug, I'm not sure is that exciting. We know ENaC is 0, RAGE is too speculative, mucin is probably too speculative, as well as IPF. NASH is kind of a boondoggle regardless. Gout is a 0. So you've got PNH. All right, so would you pay $3 billion for partial rights to 2 drugs and whole rights to 1 complement drug? That's fairly competitive as well. I don't know, it kind of seems like a short. Let's look at the their press releases and kind of see what they've been focusing on. Okay, well they have results for 𝗩𝗟𝗍𝗏𝗏. Oh wow, 94% reduction in Z-AAT accumulation. All right, still need to clear the lungs, right? But that's pretty good results. The plot has thickened. I withdraw the comments about there being a short. I have to look at AATD liver sequelae. Is it really that severe? But if I'm a patient, I definitely want this. I wonder if the FDA says, all right, well, is this really a meaningful endpoint, AAT reduction? Do you need to show fibrosis or some other harder endpoint? Because AAT is not, I understand Z-AAT is the causative agent of the illness etiologically, but the FDA likes to see symptom improvement as a primary endpoint, or transplant or something really hard like that, which is unlikely to occur here. So I don't know what the phase 3 endpoint, here it is. 160 patients, that's it? Wow. And here's the primary endpoint would be a decrease from baseline of at least 1 stage of the histologic fibrosis staging through biopsy at week 106. That's a 2-year study. Yeesh. So that's the problem, is you have to translate that surrogate marker into a clinical outcome, which can be difficult, needless to say. But this is still pretty exciting. Could that be $1 billion drug? It doesn't seem like it. But it's kind of weird, like, to take a drug that only fixes half the illness. Like, the lungs are relevant as well. 94% reduction, that's amazing. 16 patients, a pretty small group there. Medivir stage. There there was a placebo, they had a 26% increase in liver ZAAT in placebo. Okay, they did serum reduction was significant, so that probably helps the lung too. Okay, so this is a 50-50 US profit split with 20 to 25% royalties. And they paid $300 up front. Nice. You could sell 300 or 400 million fairly easily if it gets approved, but I don't know if it'll hit this endpoint. 2-year endpoint, pretty good, but it's a gamble. It's definitely a gamble. If this is their only drug, it's sort of fairly valued, but you do get these other drugs kind of for free. Although I'm not sure they're worth much. It certainly doesn't look like a screaming long. Very interesting though. I appreciate the question to look at the stock. I definitely have been slacking on looking at biotech. I've been really busy programming. I program every day. I was up last night till 2 a.m. writing some stuff about Chinese and Canadian stocks, German stocks as well. Trying to find a good Australian stock API. Or I'm going to upload my stock models, so if you want to check those out, you can head over to my GitHub